Good morning and welcome to Monkhouse on Mondays. Today I have with me Jon Hymus, who works at SERCO Leisure. Jon, just give us a little bit of background. What you do, who you do it for?
So, Jon Hymus, I'm the Commercial Director for SERCO Leisure Limited. We're part of SERCO Group, which is a large blue chip company that effectively provides solutions to governments, local authorities and a whole range of different people across the globe. And we sit within the Citizen Services Division, which is in essence everything that touches the citizen.
Okay, so some of those businesses must have been quite busy during lockdown then, with quite a lot of pressure on them to do some things in very different ways.
Yeah, definitely. So I think as we were talking sort of previously, you know, it's been ups and downs for sort of SERCO. Thankfully, because we're such a large organisation, that's with a balanced portfolio, that has meant that we're pretty stable. So that's good news. Some of our transportation pieces have been sort of, you know, influenced quite heavily. We run the Caledonian Sleeper and some services up in Scotland, ferry services and what have you. And then of course the leisure bit, which has been dramatically impacted. We've also been involved though quite heavily with the recovery part of that, and so for example test centres, the very first test centre in the UK was at Nottingham at Holme Pierpoint, which is one of our facilities, and there's been a real sort of link across between members of our team who have then been supporting into those test centres. We've got, I think, 35 test centres that SERCO are involved with across the UK now, with a large support from our sort of leisure team. And they quite like that because actually bits of SERCO are not really involved with the customer consumer facing kind of piece, whereas our teams do that every day. So that's been really nice because it has meant that we haven't needed to furlough lots of our team members. They've been involved in that. And then actually the wider SERCO has been involved in the track and trace sort of project. And so again, behind the scenes, some of our team have been supporting that, supporting the scaling that's been involved with it. So yeah, quite an interesting time.
Good, excellent. And I always ask this question of my guests because the Chief Medical Officer hasn't been telling us recently, but always did, that we were allowed our physical activity and things. So what have you done to stay active, Jon?
Yeah, good question. So my son is a soldier, and actually he was not at work for a large period of time right at the beginning, and so he was actually coming home and lived at home, and so we were actually heading off up the North Downs on the North Downs Way, and he was tabbing. We were doing some long walks along there. Him with a big sort of 30k. Backpack, me with nothing and struggling to keep up, which was quite interesting. So plenty of walking. Interestingly, I've also been sort of doing quite a bit in my garage. I have some free weights and an exercise bike. The flip side of it though is there's been lots of downtime, and so my diet has not been as good as it probably should have been. And as Paul Street, our head of health and fitness, says, you can't outrun a bad diet, Dave.
Absolutely. And I've got a 13-year-old that's so far sold, I think it's 340 quid's worth of cakes to neighbours, but have been sharing in those as well. So I know the feeling on the diet. It's not been good. But let's get down to why we wanted to talk. And I'm really interested to know how SERCO Leisure in particular has reacted to lockdown and what you guys have been doing during lockdown.
So actually it's been a really interesting time and actually quite a useful time for us. We'd identified quite a number of projects that we had been working on, and it's sort of scoped in really for sort of the next 2 years, and we've actually used it as an opportunity to accelerate a number of those projects. So whilst it's been a tough time, and certainly from a financial perspective that's the case, it's actually been a really, really useful and beneficial time. So for example, we have completely upgraded and changed all of our websites. Our websites were sort of 10, 12 years old, not great. They're fully responsive, completely new, and we've used that as an opportunity to put those into place. We've had an upgrade on our management system server, which was really helpful to be able to do that with the sites not open, so that's been good. And there's been sort of 3 or 4 other, you know, really big kind of projects that we've used the time to sort of accelerate. And so the teams are going to be coming back and probably finding some real improvements, which is fantastic. I think we've also been a little bit different in so much that we've had a number of our facilities sort of reopen sort of later on, and particularly the national centres, for example, where elite sport training sort of started relatively early in. The guys there have been effectively supporting that and had some really good feedback from UK Sport and NGBs that are involved with this.
Yeah, and I spoke to Jack actually at Home Pierpont, and he gave us some indications of the work they were doing around that, which was just fascinating. Now, I live in Leicester. I live in outside of the Ring of Steel, as there's some of us are calling it. But you've been doing some really interesting stuff at Market Harbour, because you've got a More Fitness there, haven't you? So talk about what you've done at More Fitness at Harbour.
Yeah, we have. Yes. So this was a bit of a toe dip for us in terms of a private facility actually, and looking at some sort of concepts there around what it was that we were going to sort of take on. And we've done some really innovative and different kind of things. And I suppose, if you were to look at what physically we've got there, we've got a really large outdoor space, which is absolutely amazing. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. It's got a really heavy kind of class following, and it's been trying to perhaps adjust the kind of small box concept and put in some really current kind of things, the outdoor training, the sort of small classes and sort of boutique-y kind of offer. So it's more of a premium at the premium end of product offering. It's quite different than what SERCO would perhaps have traditionally provided, and so it's been a really interesting experiment so far, which and I think, as you were referencing, we actually have opened that facility last week on the 7th, with a view that effectively offering an outdoor gym concept. What we have there is a large kind of yard. It's called the training yard. And we've got something called the tool shed in there, which is in effect a raise box, which is something provided by Indigo, and that's like a converted shipping container with some really great graphics all over it. It's got a couple of squat racks at the back of it. It's got some bars that you can hang TRX and punch bags and what have you, and then it's got a load of sort of functional training gear inside it. So we've used that as a base on this AstroTurf base. We've also taken some of the equipment outside and dropped it underneath some gazebos. And so far, the take-up's been reasonably good. Certainly, the members there have really appreciated coming back. And it kind of has built on the concept that we were delivering last year, where a lot of the classes were actually taking place outside in that yard, which on a sunny day is amazing. Not quite so good on a wet day, and we have suffered last week because we had about 2 or 3 days of continuous rain, and we at the moment we're not providing outdoor classes just due to that grey area about the number of people that you can have leaving that and actually using it more as an outdoor gym. And so far, it's going reasonably well.
Oh, that's really positive, isn't it? Because it's something different, and it's something that I know the sector is starting to look at more around how we maximise the spaces that we've got, people's desire. I know my neighbours and myself, we've been running, we've been cycling, we've been walking, we've been using the environment much more. And I guess as operators, we've now got to find, how do you tap into that? How do you tap into what people are doing now and go forward, but still keep that engagement with people? So I guess outdoor is a really interesting way of doing it. So I'm glad
with you.
I've responded well to it. That's brilliant. So good. So the other bit for you guys is, because you operate across the UK and in other parts of the country, you have actually open sites, haven't you? You've got Jersey open, and I think Bangalore in Northern Ireland is open as well. So what learnings are you taking from opening those sites that you're going to bring back to England for the 25th, when we open our doors eventually to our customers that want to come back?
Yeah, it's sort of relatively early days. I think the interesting piece from us from Jersey. So Jersey opened last month. I think it was the second facility or set of facilities in the UK. I think beaten by Guernsey, much to their consternation. And what was really interesting is how the customers adapted quite quickly. So they turned up beach ready. There was a bit of flack initially, I think, from that, but actually most of the customers have been happy with it. They've fully understood. They've been accepting, and so I think that's a real comfort, I think, to sort of site teams who are perhaps nervous coming back and going, how is this going to be? What are customers going to react like? I mean, I'd likened it to sort of supermarkets. When we all first turned up to supermarkets and realised we had to queue, first of all, it was a real reaction. But actually now most people have got used to it, and it's become the new norm. I think the other piece that we were a little concerned about was how people would react to booking online, but so far no problems at all. Bangor in Northern Ireland went live on Friday. Most customers have been happy to actually go ahead and book. There's been no problems there. It's actually been pretty even across the day, which has been really good, because that was one of the concerns. And I think what we are doing with each of those facilities is we're actually looking at how we scale. So Jersey has already moved to a lessening of the lockdown. That was only open 2 weeks ago. We're now going to be moving to open changing rooms. So it's been really good to actually then see what it's like live, to be agile, and then to be able to then adapt and adjust your offering as things sort of scale up on quite a small level. So we've been quite fortunate from that perspective, in being able to learn quite quickly from those lessons.
Yeah. So tell me, because there's an awful lot said around social distancing, around sanitation, and all of those types of things. How have you helped the team prepare to reopen? Because there must be, just as there's customers reticent to come back in, there must be team members that are reticent as well. So what sort of things have you done around the team to give them confidence?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that we have done, which I think has been absolutely brilliant, is that our business had invested quite heavily into this type of technology, the technology we're using prior to lockdown. It had been something the SERCO group has been doing over the last 2 years. So a lot of the team were used to doing it. During lockdown, every single week, we have held effectively an open forum where anybody on furlough, anybody across the business can dial in. We do about an hour. It's hosted by the senior management team. It's led by the managing director, Simon Bailey. And in essence, it's an opportunity to communicate what's been going on around the sites, keeping them up to date with what's been talking about, some positive shout outs about some really good things that have been taking place. And this is for people who are actually still in work and those who are continue to be furloughed. And we found that to be an awesome communication tool. And actually, we're going to take this now into post-COVID. So beyond that, we won't do them weekly, but we'll certainly use it as an opportunity to sort of face-to-face communicate with our teams, which has been absolutely brilliant. And we've been getting about sort of 150 to 200 people a week dialing into these. Not always the same sets of people. There's been a real mix of individuals. And so that's positive, because it then does allow you to explain your reopening plans, talk about what the customer comms are going to be, talk about what the physical changes are going to be, show video, use that, which 5 years ago you wouldn't have had the capability to be able to do. So we think that that's been really, really positive. I think from sort of our perspective, all we were waiting for was a date. Right. And literally we'd created a model that then could be flexed. And we needed that date. It wasn't quite as, we weren't expected to be quite so late. So there's been some positives around that, which has meant that we're able to then review what we're doing. And I think the only other piece that we've had around that preparedness piece has been, now we've got some clarity. We are having to make a few minor adjustments to those plans because, talking about the social distancing, how far gym equipment is, ventilation, all of those kinds of things are going to sort of come into play. So I think for me, the biggest piece though has been that communication and just, having that constant ability to interact. Because I think it's going to be strange for a lot of team members who have been, off for 13 weeks coming back to work.
Absolutely. It is going to be tough for a lot of people, isn't it? So in the last couple of minutes that we've got, Jon, what's the biggest surprise that you've had from the feedback from your customers and from your staff, having opened Harbour and Jersey and also the Aurora Bangor? What's been the biggest surprise that's come through?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure so far. Oh, actually, no, I've got an answer to that. So I think it is actually how pleased everybody has been to get that date and actually then know that they're coming back. I think it's very easy when you work in a customer service industry to then get focused on just the negatives, just the ones, the mistakes that are made or the negative kind of bits and pieces. There is an absolute hunger out there amongst the general population to come back to their leisure centre. And I think it goes back to almost some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. These are community facilities. They really, how much they mean to those individuals is really difficult to measure from a financial perspective or from a wellness point of view, but that's been the biggest surprise to me, actually seeing that manifest itself in customer feedback.
And that's really good to hear, because one of the outcomes of the survey we did, 65,000 people responded, was actually people from the lower seg groups actually said they would value their site more on reopening. And I think what you've just said is actually the reality is absolutely the same. So that's really positive to hear and a great way to end the conversation, Jon. So thank you so much for your time today. Really good to catch up. And I'm really looking forward to, because normally, Jon, you and I normally meet over a pint or so this is feeling a bit odd to do it over wine. I'm looking forward to a bow tie and a pint, mate. So we'll catch up soon. All right. Good to see you.
That sounds good. Thank you very much. Cheers.